And the TARDIS has arrived. We're with Time Lord Tanya. Tanya, very cool news. One of the first real time I sat down with Doctor Who, it was Chris Eccleston was the Doctor, and now they have the Chris Eccleston source book out at Cubicle
Yes.
7.
Yes, I'm
how do you feel
really
about
excited to get it.
this? And why are you excited to get it?
Well, I hadn't really had a lot of interaction with Doctor Who. I had seen the Fox movie, and I liked it. I really did. I was one of those few people that went, you know what? There was nothing wrong with that movie. Of course, there's a little bit more love for it now than there was when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I had recorded it on tape off of the air, and I actually really liked it. I couldn't remember too much about any of the other Doctors. I could remember a little bit from when Tom Baker had his run on PBS, because my brother loved the show. But I couldn't really, other than like the blue police box getting stuck in my mind, I couldn't really remember anything about it. But I remember sitting and watching a marathon of something on the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't remember what it was. It might have been Ghost Hunters or something. I had it mindlessly in the background. I wasn't paying any attention. But then suddenly I heard his voice. And I looked up at the screen, and there's Eccleston saying, "Do you want to come with me?" And then there's like the TARDIS and the set and the music, and I'm just like, and my jaw just dropped, and I went, oh, Doctor Who, yes. And there was literally tears. I don't even know why, but there was tears like coming down my cheeks. I was so happy to suddenly have Doctor Who on television in the United States. I'm just so excited. I'm like, yes, Doctor Who, fantastic. And I couldn't wait for it to start.
And then you saw Rose, and how did you feel going in with the first episode?
I felt pretty good. Rose was basically the show was starting as an introduction for pretty much an entire generation that were my age, hadn't really ever grown up with Doctor Who. And so we're kind of seeing everything through Rose's eyes, and this weird guy just popping out of nowhere, grabbing her hand and saying, "Run," and then just running and things blowing up, and you're like, okay, let's do this.
Yes.
You know?
That's exactly my introduction, where I don't get into things. I have an addictive personality. I get obsessed with things.
Oh, so do I. I obsessive compulsive disorder mixed with ADD, kind of, you are just obsessed with this thing, sometimes for a long time, sometimes for a short time, but you have to, when you like something, you don't like something.
And I always thought, and with Doctor Who, I always kind of knew that once I start, it's going to be consuming. So I had to make sure I had that little bit of spare space, in order to accommodate for what I knew was coming, and I had no idea what was coming.
Yeah, I expected it because I had remembered a little bit of some of the stuff that when it aired on PBS, and I was thinking, oh well, I was really prepared for cheesy special effects and terrible looking Cybermen, and I was actually kind of prepared for that. But what I saw on screen was beautiful in its own bizarre way. It was just, the colors were bright and vibrant, and there was an energy about it that you couldn't find on any other show.
And how do you translate that energy, that getting into the way that you described entering the Doctor Who universe? How do you translate that into running the role-playing game?
Well, the way that I do it is I basically, depending on whether or not I have anybody who's played the game or not, or seen a lot of the show, which actually happened the last time I ran a game. There was somebody who had barely seen the show, had no idea, because he had chosen Ianto Jones as a character, had never seen Torchwood before, never had no idea who the character was, and so I would basically do a rundown that it's basically it's a alien doctor who's looking to fix the problems of the universe, and that's really kind of it.
Mhm.
And then you just sort of you just kind of jump into it. You give the characters a thing, and you basically you kind of do the old fashioned, characters meet in a tavern and here's your plot hook. And it's kind of what you do, but you do it in a Doctor Who way, where you get an emergency distress call, or you get a message on the psychic paper, or suddenly the TARDIS just appears someplace random that it wasn't supposed to go.
Interesting. When I was ran the operate the ice base adventure a few times over the past few weeks, and over the time I was kind of thinking original pre-gens, original characters and stuff. But by doing it, these public things with that, and even in the convention games, I'm like, no, I can't really get away with that unless doing it as a campaign, because people love these characters, even the companions, K9, even I had Strax as a PC, and people were just like, oh my God, I get to play Strax. Why do we love these characters? What is it about these characters?
I love him. I love Strax. I love him. He's just his really twisted sense of humor mixed with like the mindless military man is just fantastic.
In the game, they had showed up in Greenland, and the guy playing Strax saw the polar bear that was kind of stalking a baby seal toward the TARDIS. So he basically wrestled the polar bear, won, and declared the polar bear to be his mount and named it Amy. All while talking perfectly like Strax.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, yes.
But what is it about these characters? I mean, why do we love even the companions? How did they accomplish this?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with the actors. If you have actors that if you don't feel any emotional connection because they're not, something isn't either. It's not that they're a bad actor or actress necessarily, but they may not be feeling the role. And if they're not feeling it, you're not going to feel it. And it's just a giant translation. But when they're having fun with the character and they're having, and it's a good script and they're having fun on set, it translates through. And there's something about that sort of you have an emotional connection with your audience that way. Because there are some shows where you just don't get that. There's a lot of television shows, especially right now, that it seems as though everyone is just standing there delivering lines. They're not getting into a story necessarily, but they have been exceedingly good with Doctor Who at finding the right actors for the right characters. And I've really yet to see another show that has done that so perfectly, other than maybe Hannibal. Hannibal, I think, might actually do that too, but Doctor Who just seems to marry the character and the role just right.
Yes. And so, I mean, we had Chris on for such a short time, and from what we've heard, he didn't have the most enjoyable experience being the Doctor. But what did Chris bring to it? What are the defining features of Chris as the Doctor?
Well, I think that it's with Christopher Eccleston, it's almost he's the Doctor's coming off of the war. He's not entirely sure he wants to keep doing what he's doing, but he almost feels the need to have to do it. He's still sort of the guardian of Earth, the savior of the universe, but he's feeling like he doesn't necessarily want to do that anymore. He's feeling kind of bitter, and kind of he has a bit of almost an old man complex going for him, even though he doesn't look that old. And but as he starts to see the world through Rose's eyes, he actually starts to sort of take back the role of the Doctor, as it were. And when he transitions into David Tennant, he's like, yes, all right, I am the Doctor once again. And it's it's not that Christopher Eccleston was necessarily a transitory doctor, even though in some ways he was.
Right.
But he had a very guarded, very reserved kind of a feel that maybe the other doctors didn't necessarily have.
How about anger with him? One of the big things, when I think back to his episodes, I think to when he saw that captured Dalek, that it was all chained down, and the rage that he had into there, and that we didn't have that the Time War story really going into that things. It was like, and me not really having a history of Doctor Who, going, what's going on here, and all that. How did you feel about that?
Well, I personally didn't know a lot about Daleks, but I knew that they were sort of the enemy of the Doctor and the enemy of the Time Lords. I knew that going in, even though I had never really ever seen the show before. It's just, it had become part of, even though I'm an American, it had still sort of become part of the subconscious nature that you kind of know that the Dalek is a horrible, terrible creature, even though this one is, in particular, is chained up and powerless, and the Doctor is just exceedingly angry at it for just existing. And it's, you almost still sort of, you almost feel bad for the Doctor at the exact same time you feel bad for the Dalek. And it's, you're kind of sad that he's so angry at this creature that is so helpless. You know what I mean? Yes.
You got a creature that's trapped inside of a casing that's chained up inside of this museum base. Do you think that episode was designed for people as well who didn't know the Daleks, so that they could have a pity, so that when the Daleks started rolling back in force, that there would be a little bit of sympathy for the enemy? Is that something that did you think was new to being applied to the Daleks as far as Doctor Who?
I think it was a little new. Upon going back and watching some of the older episodes, you do see a little bit of, especially in some particular episodes, you do see some sympathy going on with some of the creatures. I know with the 2 movies that I have now seen, the Daleks were basically these just, you might as well have almost had robots, because they were being thrown at the people left and right and killing and blowing things up, and they didn't really have any personality whatsoever. But once you actually start to give a monster personality and you start to humanize them, that sort of automatically gives the audience something to attach emotionally to, regardless of whether or not you might feel pity for the Dalek for being a prisoner in of the wealthy man. I can't actually remember his name off the top of my head. Of the wealthy billionaire, but it was just something for the audience to kind of feel that, you know, that this is a horrible creature. You haven't really seen the Daleks do anything terrible, but you know that it's horrible. It may not necessarily as one soldier of countless trillions of Daleks. It may not, as a being, may not necessarily sort of warrant what it's been done to it, but you can kind of sort of understand where the Doctor is coming from, even though you personally have never seen the horror that's been inflicted.
In fact, it's a little bit more frightening to not know what did it do, what is it capable.
Yeah, because the Doctor has simultaneously has the anger and the fear, terrified of the Dalek at the exact same time that he's angry at it. So you know, if the Doctor is terrified, there's a good reason why he's terrified.
Have you run a Dalek as the monster adventure?
No, at least not yet. I've been going off the cuff a lot. For a lot of my adventures, I've actually been taking ideas from other British movies and television shows and sort of interspersing them in with my Doctor Who. That way, if anyone else like me who watches a lot of British television will totally get the joke that's happening right here, right now, and they will know possibly how to deal with the either monster or the problem at hand. Like my last adventure had I basically stole the idea from Day of the Triffids from it. So I had basically giant monstrous plants attacking, and then it was after a while that a couple of my players went, "Oh my god, I know what these are."
And they're also nice because the Doctor's sonic screwdriver can't do much against plants.
No, absolutely not. It's organics as a whole. The sonic screwdriver is utterly ineffective against.
Because that was one thing that I saw when I ran the Ice Space game twice, where when the guy was playing the Doctor was doing he was like holding like 2 handfuls of dice for doing a sonic screwdriver thing, going, "You have to be kidding me. Do you actually want me to roll this?" Like, there's a 1 in a billion chance you're going to get all ones, and I'm going to laugh. So yes.
Yeah. In that particular game, I was essentially using the Doctor as an NPC. I was the Doctor, but then again, the entire thing was just a giant dreamscape anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it really mattered one way or the other. But to actually, I like throwing characters into bizarre situations and then force them to have to deal with it. They have to think their way out, as opposed to, let's pick up a phaser and blast everything.
Yeah. How do you start? We're getting into one of the big things I want to talk to you about is how to write Doctor Who, and I thought that I like those episodes where it starts where they're in the end of another adventure, and that adventure leads into the main adventure. And that's kind of what I did with the Ice Space thing, and I kind of even had a script with the beginning that kind of summarized the plot, had some witty banter, and then just starts with action in the middle of it. How do you do things that way? What do you like handle those kinds of adventures?
It actually kind of depends on what I feel like. If I have an overall story going on, like my the adventure that I'm writing right now will actually be tied into the Titanic and the aliens that aren't human, but they have purposely made themselves look human, and they're terraphiles, and they're like into everything that humanity once was, and like the silliness, like the fact that it's a Titanic in space. I mean, that sort of thing. And so also the Coming of the Terraphiles book, sort of, that also played into the same thing, where you have an entire solar system of aliens that look human because they're fans of humans. And they have this weird, twisted idea of what human history was. So suddenly you've got polo being played on rhinoceros back instead of on horses, because, well, rhinos were on Earth and they're 4-legged, and so why can't you ride them?
And it's cool.
It is cool, right?
Why wouldn't you do rhino polo?
And there was actually a joke made where there was a cricket game was being played, but they were playing it wrong. And the Doctor basically went, "Well, nobody understands cricket anyway, so who really cares?"
What other adventures have you been doing that based on other British television things?
Well, I was thinking of possibly doing a cloning thing. We're having basically cloning around, where the characters are actually dealing with other characters who are then killed, and suddenly that character reappears later, and they went, whoa, wait a minute, I thought you died. And it's like, no, I didn't die. What are you talking about? And then there's this whole confusion going on, where suddenly a character has reappeared who may not necessarily remember what happened up to a certain point because their memories hadn't downloaded into the giant computer that's been collecting them. So they might remember events up to a certain point, and then because they're a clone they don't actually remember past that point. So then you almost have to sort of refill someone back in as to what's happening. I haven't quite finished how I'm going to work that.
You're doing Doctor Who in paranoia.
Kind of, yeah. I was thinking sort of paranoia-ish, but mixed with like Orphan Black, where you might have clones of the same person but doing different things. I was thinking of that along those lines. Then I thought Primeval, but then I'm like, oh no, dinosaurs has been done. So, even though I kind of like Primeval, but I really wasn't entirely sure I wanted to do that because, dinosaurs in London's been done before. But, I'm sort of like tweaking things in my head, maybe even doing a murder mystery.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe even doing that. But once again, it's one of those things where it may not necessarily feel like Doctor Who if you kind of do like a detective story. But I don't know.
They did the Agatha Christie one. It still felt very Doctor Who.
Yeah, there was the Agatha Christie one, but then that was also tied into a giant space wasp and a crystal heart pendant a la Titanic, which I honestly, I still don't entirely get that. I really don't. I was just kind of, wait, I don't understand the crystal pendant thing. What is that? That actually kind of made me go, okay, whatever.
Move along.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Earthbound Time Lords?
No.
It's a fan group that's been around. It's a gaming group that's been playing Doctor Who for about 30 years. And they publish every so often a fanzine magazine about Doctor Who gaming. And they've been about a year since their last issue, but there's still a lot of very good plot hooks and things in there. I think you might enjoy it.
I think I may have come across them not too long ago while I was searching for material for as I was writing my new adventure. I was thinking of possibly introducing some magic and having magic rules. Especially when you actually have witches in the Shakespeare episode with Martha and the Doctor, and which is essentially, advanced mathematics is magic. But I was kind of looking for almost Doctor Who-ish magic rules, because I was thinking of maybe having a fantasy world that was kind of more anime inspired when it came to the Terraphiles, like having like a vacation, because they may not necessarily understand that television and media is separate from actual human existence. So it got kind of muddled up at one point. So I was thinking of having like ridiculously tall, thin people with brightly colored hair and big eyes at some point, and having like a magic system and sort of an anime world where part of the world might have these giant mecha battling one another, and then another part of the world might have dragons and sorcerers and magical girls. So I was toying with that. So I was actually looking for information involving magic, and there was I had found I wish I could remember which unofficial Doctor Who source book it was, but it was an early Doctor, and it dealt with setting in Camelot, and there was actually a little notation for magic rules. So I downloaded that and I copied off those pages, but I haven't actually kind of dove back into that yet because I'm still kind of toying with what I want to do.
Right. Cool. So let's go into this discussion. When you sit down, when you decide, okay, I'm running Doctor Who, Queen City Conquest, or whatever I'm going to do. I've got people coming over that love Doctor Who. Where do you approach it? Where do you start? What is the first step in your process for coming up with a story?
Venue. Whether or not I'm going to be able to make a campaign off of it, or it's basically going to be a one-off adventure. That's where I start. So I basically, if it's going to be a self-contained adventure, I have to write it as a self-contained adventure, which basically you have to write it like an episode of Doctor Who. Essentially, that's what you need to do. Whereas if you're doing a campaign, you kind of maybe want to write that as more of a story arc, kind of thinking of an entire season, what an entire season of Doctor Who might be like, and then moving from there. You might have to tweak a few things along the way depending on what your players do, but that's kind of where I start. I think, okay, am I writing this for a convention, or am I writing this for our campaign world? That's where I have to start. And then from there, I sort of steamroll with ideas.
Okay. So you're on page 1, you have your concepts, how does a Doctor Who adventure begin? If you're doing this let's start. If you're doing this like a convention, and I think of those as the Christmas specials, how do you begin one of those versus beginning an episode for the campaign?
Well, I start from that. I basically go with, okay, what's my plot summary? What am I thinking I'm going to do? So for Queen City Conquest, I've got I am stealing a few ideas and a couple of monsters from some source books, and I'm sort of mashing them together and writing an original story around that. So I've got several different things going on at once, depending on what the players do and where they decide to go in the setting will kind of depend on essentially what they find out and the characters that they run into. So once I have the plot summary, I move then to characters and NPCs, because a Doctor Who story is nothing without intriguing characters. The characters are what drive the story. So you could have a bare bones story, absolutely nothing going on, but if you have compelling characters, monsters, NPCs, what have you, you can almost wing the rest.
How do you come up with the characters? What are your steps for making a character believable and intriguing and worthy of being a part of the Doctor Who universe in your non-canonical way?
I do borrow a lot. Like I said before, I do borrow a lot from other films and television series. So basically, whatever characters that are there, I then sort of translate to Doctor Who. In some cases, it's easy. In some cases, it's hard. The great thing about Doctor Who, though, is that because it occupies all of time and space, you could watch Kingdom of Heaven and take one of those knights and stick them in a medieval Doctor Who game and change their name if you want to. In some cases, especially if it's an obscure character that you've fallen in love with, you have no idea that the entire character has been lifted from one movie and literally dropped into the other, which is really great. I'm going to be honest, I'm stealing very liberally from not Shakespeare, but a contemporary of Shakespeare for my next game at Conquest. So the characters themselves are basically going to be characters from that play, and they're going to be enacting their lives in real life. So I'm going to have characters that are going to be speaking English, but it's sort of an Elizabethan style English.
Are you going to be able to keep that for 4 hours?
I can't do straight Elizabethan English. I can sort of do almost a transitional modern English and Elizabethan and marry them together, but I can't do full on. Like if you go to a Renaissance festival, the characters that speak to you in character don't do full Elizabethan English. They don't. It's impossible, and so, especially with people who may not really be into Shakespeare and be able to understand the language as well. So it's easier to sort of use some words and almost have the rhyming and speaking pattern is almost easier than it is to actually just use that full on like that. It's easier to have the voices in your head. If you watch the TV show or film or whatever it is before you actually have your game, like you may actually before you have the Doctor Who game, you might want to put in some Doctor Who in the Blu-ray player, just even as background noise, just so that you hear the voices in your head, and you kind of you go through that. Okay, so this is I might do this for the Doctor, I might do that for the Doctor, or oh, that was a really good line. You know what? I think I'm going to use that.
One thing I've been doing for all my games, like I'm running Deadlands Noir, which is 1930s New Orleans. Different Russian were used in my Doctor Who thing. One thing I've been enjoying is looking up random insert, whatever you're writing about, insult generator. And that way, anything else, there's always going to be a part where a PC annoys an NPC, and then you have a couple stock lines from their culture, even if it's like Shakespearean, it's really good to be able to cut them down a little bit, and it's make you look really smart.
Yeah, I'm sort of I would actually have to when it comes to actually having speaking in more of an Elizabethan way, it actually really does help to pull out some Hamlet or some Macbeth and just read it. So you have some of the insults that some of the characters throw at one another, you have fresh in your mind, or there are actual tables in that you can look up, like you said, like the random insult generator, so that you can just have as a cheat sheet, just have sitting there right in front of either on your screen, because I'm kind of hoping to have a tablet PC for my game. And or have it on your screen so you can just bring it up and call him like a oh god, I'm trying to put myself on the spot and just totally ad lib an insult, but there's absolutely nothing coming to mind. A half drowned chicken just pulled from the Thames or something, you know.
So now we've got the characters, we got everything. How do you begin the adventure involving the PCs? How do you begin a Doctor Who? Do you just say your TARDIS shows up here, deal with it? Do you have them actually roll to see if they show up there and make the situation worse by failing the TARDIS navigating thing? Do you have it be the cloister bells ringing and they're pretty much yanked there to have to save the universe? How do you begin?
It once again, it kind of depends on the situation. If it's a long-running campaign, and like you had said earlier, you move from the previous adventure into the next, you might have suddenly the Doctor has to disappear because something has gone wrong inside the TARDIS, and then suddenly he tells you to throw like the third switch on the left in the science panel, and suddenly someone goes, "Where's the science panel?" And then it all just goes wrong from there. So that's an entire possibility. Usually when it's a convention setting and it's a one-time game, I usually try to come up with an excuse to have all the characters in one spot. You know, either you have been traveling with the Doctor for a while, or you've either been kidnapped and you have to get your way out of the situation, or like the last one I did, it was a dreamscape and everybody essentially woke up in a dream, as it were. And so you're all kind of together in the dreamscape. Essentially everybody had to find everybody else. So it was, everyone was in a different location. You could still hear one another, but there was a thick fog, and you actually had to start making rolls to determine whether or not you accidentally sort of ran into somebody, or a random tree if you failed miserably. But yeah, once again, it does kind of depend on the situation. So you might have characters that are kind of forced to be with one another, or ones that have just started out in the adventure naturally. It all just depends on the situation.
In the first Doctor Who, the first couple of Doctors, the TARDIS, like plot device, it delivers from area to area, but it wasn't easy for the Doctor to leave the situation or to retreat to the TARDIS as the battle station. There was always something happening. It was always falling down a cliff, getting blown up, knocked over, breaking down. How do you avoid basically having the adventure end 2 seconds later with them saying, "Yeah, that looks scary. Let's go fly away"?
Yeah, let's go. Let's retreat back to the TARDIS, have a nice cup of tea and some scones, and let's ignore this whole thing. The last time, because once again, moving back to the fog situation, essentially I had the Doctor sort of gather everyone into one location and then start to move away from the TARDIS. And then somebody realized, uh-oh, we've walked away from the TARDIS and the fog is as thick as pea soup, and suddenly we can't see the TARDIS. Crap, where's the TARDIS? So I've gotten rid of, I actually cheated a little bit with that. And that suddenly you've taken you're about 10 meters away from the TARDIS, but because you really have no orientation whatsoever, you can't quite remember which direction the TARDIS is in. So you can't just automatically retreat to it. So that was a little cheat. I have to admit, I cheated a little bit on that. But
it's so different than them having like the aliens suddenly have the ability to take the lock off the TARDIS and walk away with it.
Or suddenly the intergalactic tow truck comes by, swings down, picks up the TARDIS, and it's like, you have a bunch of unpaid parking tickets, and then drives off. And you go, wait, that's not, we don't have unpaid targets. There's some sort of misunderstanding.
Oh, that would be such a great way to begin an adventure with Vogons.
Yes, I did suddenly go Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy there. Got to admit, I really did. That did just happen. I totally did that.
So, now that you got everybody involved in there, you have the investigation part. How do you keep Doctor Who being fun in Doctor Who and it not going Call of Cthulhu at this point?
Ooh,
or do you want it to go Call of Cthulhu? I don't know.
You know, it kind of depends on my mood. I really, it does. For the con, because I am actually running a Call of Cthulhu style game at one point, I might actually keep the levity higher. It just, so, you know, have some funny, silly things happen. Even just lighten the mood with a ball or something. I don't even know. I haven't quite figured out some of the details in my story yet, but I was thinking of having that happen, or maybe something going horribly, terribly wrong with a computer system and everything failing and the electricity goes out and doesn't necessarily, and there isn't necessarily anything in the dark to be afraid of, but there's that little twist of, oh my God, it's completely dark, there's no power, something's going to leap out, but nothing ever leaps out.
You were telling me about last year with it. People were having a hard time figuring out what was going on and what was happening. How do you handle that when they just won't go to the clue that you're shining a spotlight on because you're getting bored, and they just will say, yeah, that's nice that is all plant is all lit up nicely with a sign that next to it says, "Hey, go over here," but they still don't go. How do you handle that?
Sometimes, well, with that particular game, I basically had the doctor appear. I had him always waiting in the wings just in case, because you never know. Sometimes a group just needs to be prodded in the right direction. So you kind of have to essentially move the story along in a very physical way by having something happen and somebody going, "Go over there. You're supposed to go over there. I'm pointing you in the right direction," quite literally. "Go that way."
So how in Doctor Who does that usually happen? Let's look at the Chris Eccleston era stuff. What happens when the characters are investigating and basically they really have to push the story forward fast? What are the types of things that happen?
Oh, well, there was the first episode where you essentially had Mickey get kidnapped and replaced by a plastic replicant. So you essentially had the replicant appear, and the doctor went, "Oh, that's just a shoddy replicant," and ripped his head off and then ran back to the TARDIS. And that basically was used as a plot device to keep the story moving and as a way for the doctor to find out where the giant intelligent plastic thing was located in order for him to have a talk with it. It's that sort of thing where you actually have something pop out as a plot device and go, "Yes, here I am. Okay," and then use it. That it happened a lot more than people might actually want to admit to.
Mm-hmm.
And that you essentially have that plot device that basically has somebody go, "Okay, we use it, we move on." And that it did happen a little bit, and it was at least done in a fun way. Like, you had the plastic Mickey, who you kind of look at him and go, "Did they seriously think that this was going to fool anyone? Really?" I understand the garbage can mimic trap, where somebody's walking along and there's a garbage can there and you don't think anything of it. But really, a guy with a literal plastic hairdo, somebody's going to notice something's up.
As the series progressed, did different doctors respond? Did they figure things out a little bit faster, do you think? Or did they really keep that going to where investigation, monster makes a little strike, and then they figure things out and go, "Oh, I should have seen that coming," then full on third act?
I'd say Tennant's doctor did a lot of sort of standing in the background, watching things as they happened, and you get kind of the sense that he knows what's going on, but he wants other people to figure it out as it's progressing, as it's moving along. You especially got that in the movies, where he didn't have his usual companion. He didn't have Rose or Martha or Donna, so he would kind of hang out in the background and watch as things moved, and he would wait for people to sort of have it click inside their heads and move along. At the exact same time, there were some things that he didn't figure out, that he couldn't quite put two and two together to make four. But he could more or less suss out what was happening. Smith's doctor, he was actually in some ways more childlike than Tennant's doctor. Even though Tennant's doctor was really excitable and energetic and, "Okay, yes, let's go do it." But Smith's doctor seemed to be very distracted most of the time. That although he did seem to see that things were happening in some cases, he didn't necessarily, because he almost did have an attention disorder, where he would go, "Oh, shiny object," and then wander off and then not pay attention to the obvious thing that was happening. So that happened a little bit with him. I have to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of Doctor Who with our new doctor, but because I haven't gotten into, I was just I was very meh about the later seasons with Matt Smith. Just I wasn't a fan of the writing of the show at all. So I just I just got kind of sad for Doctor Who, and it didn't have that sort of wonder and energy that the show had earlier on. So I actually haven't seen a lot of that, but I just, especially later on with Matt Smith's Doctor, just becoming so dark and broody. Just, I don't know. There was
Well,
something
then
about
you're in
that.
for a real dark treat with Capaldi here. I mean, if I think about the definitive on that, think of what he's like on it. He's walking around kind of like trying to figure things out, piece things out that are really bothering him that he can't figure out or remember in a very dark kind of Frankenstein
He's
trying to
almost
figure out how to
angry.
make the
He's almost
monster.
angry. Yeah, he's almost angry that he can't figure things out. You know what I mean? That he is like in his mind, he goes, I used to be able to be faster than this. I used to be able to figure things out well before everyone else, and I'm not. And that ticks me off. And
Or he's had so many successes that he's hard on himself, and that I should be able to figure out the impossible because I've done it already a million times.
Mm-hmm. And which kind of comes, which almost has almost a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy quality to it too, where you've already done 6 impossible things before breakfast. Why not go to Millie Ways? And it's sort of like that, where he is almost angry at himself for being such an amazing doctor for all those other lives, and then he's almost it's almost like he's sort of upset and angry with himself that he's not as young and he's not as fast and he's not as spry as he used to be, and he's just kind of unlike the other doctors where they might be angry and upset at situations that happened around them. He's almost angry at himself, which is a bit of a twist on it, though.
So the thing that I'm thinking about here now is that we got our investigation going. We figured out the monsters. We're about to get everything kicking into gear.
Mm.
How do you write an adventure that can still survive the mechanic of story points when everybody starts throwing buckets of story points at you to completely throw things in different directions? How can you create something flexible enough to withstand that?
That actually is almost a DM who can think on their feet. You really do kind of need a DM who can bend their story to go with what the characters are doing. Like, you have the megalomaniac who is plotting to take over the world and is about to press the big red button, and the characters aren't in the right place to stop him. So you almost have to come up with a reason as to why he doesn't press the giant button and take over the world. Or by that standing, you could actually have him press the button, and then suddenly the characters have to figure out, oh no, he's just launched the giant weapon to literally take over the world or take over the universe or threaten all of mankind by blowing up the sun or whatever the thing is, and then go, oh no, it's too late. And then they have to then either go, okay, either we're going to deal with this and try and stop the inevitable from happening, and hopefully we can pull a miracle out of this, or let's just head back to the hotel, have a nice dinner, maybe a pint, some tea, and some jammy Dodgers, and cause the world has just gone to hell, everybody.
Well, that makes it more interesting. I mean, that's when you get like the episodes like Journey's End with David Tennant's last episode, where the master has taken over the world.
Yeah.
Then you have to...
Yeah, they basically hit a giant reset button so that never happened.
Story
But
points.
But what if, like with the Doctor Who movies, they do succeed? The Daleks do take over the Earth, and you essentially have to become freedom fighters and save humanity from its inevitable extinction, which was along those same lines with the Master taking over the world, and that you have to try and find a way to save the Earth, or find a way to go back into the past and hit the reset button so that this never happened. Either way works.
But as you're writing the adventure, not as the DMing of it, but as you're planning it, is there a point where you just have to leave the module blank and say, they're going to break things here, so here's some good solid characters, here's what the villain's going to do, and just go with it from there? Is there a point where you just leave it very gray, or do you think about the main courses of action as you're writing this in, going into a third act?
I tend to have, because of Doctor Who being very wibbly wobbly, it is. When you're dealing with characters, like if you do have a Jack Harkness who has his miniature vortex manipulator, or you have River Song, who is, let's face it, she's a Time Lord, who can manipulate time and space. If you're using those kinds of characters, you have to be able to be flexible in that they might suddenly decide that they're going to jump back 15 minutes and keep this thing that just happened from happening. So you actually have to be very flexible with your overall story. You basically have, like I said it before, your story is pretty much character driven. You might have a basic plot, but depending on what the characters do, may greatly change how you expected the ending to be. So if you have a character who is evil, but they might be mind controlled, whether or not the characters kill that person, somehow manage to figure out that they're being mind controlled, and they essentially remove that mind control, or they take them prisoner, or something along those lines, might greatly affect the ending of the actual story.
So how do you wrap it up? How do you figure it? Do you just have a kind of, well, it probably will be happily ever after, or is that really as where you put on your DM hat to write the ending of the story?
A happily ever after. We all know that stories do not necessarily end happily ever after.
Especially in the Doctor Who universe.
Especially in the Doctor Who universe. Bittersweet endings are run rampant. And that we might have saved the day, but we may have lost some people doing it. And you just really do have to deal with that sort of thing as it happens. Where you might actually have a story where your Rose Tyler character doesn't survive. Mm-hmm. Or Donna Noble is killed in action, or Jack is vaporized by a Dalek. That sort of thing just might happen, and you just kind of have to deal with it. Now, you could, because you are dealing with time travel, you essentially could have the Doctor or the companions or both jump backwards to try and keep some of these things from happening. But because it is the Doctor Who universe, and you do occasionally have situations that are time locked that can't be changed, that is also an out for you. You basically, the Doctor goes, this thing needed to happen, and the TARDIS is literally not going to let us change it. And sometimes you just kind of have to let that sort of thing happen. When you have a character like Claire, however, who can actually just reappear as another character in another time stream, then you got a little bit of wiggle room. Because suddenly you have another Claire appearing out of nowhere, going, "Hi guys," and so you can use that as an out, or you know what? Just let the dice fall where they may.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things just don't go right.
So what kind of GM dominates the Eccleston series? If you thought of the Eccleston season as a campaign, what would be the defining characteristics of the GM? Was he letting the dice fall where they may? Was he manipulating things in there? Was he taking a little more leeway with the rules, per se?
It definitely did follow some of the strict rules about your main characters are unkillable. Where you're not going to kill Rose, you're not going to kill Mickey, you're not going to kill Jackie, you're not going to kill Jack. And the doctor sort of kind of died at the end, but not really. He just regenerated. So that stereotypical rule was definitely in play, where we can't harm our main characters. But as far as everyone else went, it really was a lot of the NPCs and a lot of the minor characters in the show did all die. All of them.
Do you think, now going with the mechanics comparison in here, was it that the GM wasn't spending their story points to have them be captured and taken away, or he didn't give them their story points, or they used their story points and just rode very poorly?
In some cases, they used their story points and rolled poorly. Because there was a little bit happening where Rose knew what to do, or in the case of Jackie grabbing the lorry and attaching it to the switch plate on the TARDIS and yanking it off, that was definitely a use of full-on story points where this shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. There's no way realistically that this ever would work, but I'm gonna burn the story points and we're gonna make this happen. That was definitely a use of full on. Let's just, you know what? Let's just go balls to the wall, burn all the story points, and let's see what happens.
Yes, those are the best times. So that's usually at the very end, or when you realize your 4-hour module is going to end at 2.5 hours, when all those story points are spent. How do you bring it to a satisfying Doctor Who conclusion with all the story points there and everything going down in the last minutes?
Well, it's usually the thing is the story points usually are used at the last possible minute, because either the dice are not rolling right, or they want to be sure that they succeed, or they succeed tremendously well, or that there's a piece of information that a character is missing to put all the puzzle pieces together, and they're not quite sure where this is going. So they'll literally go, okay, you know what? I'm burning a story point. Could you just tell me what it is I'm missing, that I'm obviously missing, that is a giant neon sign that I should be seeing in front of me, but I don't see it. And so that a lot of that all happens, all, like you said, all at the very end. But it honestly, I do have some contingency plans, like if I'm at the 2.5 hour mark and you've essentially gone through what I had planned, but then you have something worked out on the side just in case. You know, maybe the villain did have a transmat pad, even though they didn't technically have one.
That's called them spending story points.
Yes. Always remember, the PCs have story points, so do your villains.
Very cool. Thank you, Time Lord Tayna, for talking to us today about how to create a good Doctor Who. and I can't wait to see how your adventures go down at Queen City this year.
If you show up at my table, I will be glad to have you.
When are you? What day are you running?
Doctor Who. Oh, when am I running Doctor Who? Friday at 7, I think. I think that's when I have my Doctor Who game. I have Friday at 7 I have a game, and Saturday and Sunday I have 1 p.m. games.
Okay.
I think wait. Saturday at 1 p.m. is my Doctor Who game. Friday night is my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Sunday is my Call of Cthulhu game.
Cool. What system are you using for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
D20 Modern.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm a little bit booked on there. I was hoping you'd say Sunday. I've got doing something different this year. I'm trying to do long form modules, so I'm doing like 2 parts where the players have a chance to level up their characters if they stick between the 2 adventures. So I'm doing Octon Cthulhu / Indiana Jones Friday afternoon, evening, Deadlands Noir afternoon, evening, and then in the evening, like you did the Star Wars game last year, we're doing Deadlands. Where it's Savage Worlds Deadlands on there with a very massive battle for North America.
Yeah, someone was running a Dresden Files game, so I wanted to snag a ticket for that because I love the Dresden Files books.
Yeah.
So I was sure to basically want to be a player to sit on that game. So I kind of had to work my games around that one.
And you hope that person doesn't change their game because you want to be in and on that game.
Well, I can always change mine if it comes down to it.
It's chess of rearranging schedules.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you more in the TARDIS.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.